Welcome to BenBinFro's Thought for the Day for Tuesday, the 19th of October. My name is James, and I live in the hamlet of Islington. Today's passage is from 2 Chronicles, chapter 34, verses 1 to 11. Josiah rules in Judah. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 31 years. He did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, and followed the examples of his ancestor David. He did not turn away from doing what was right. During the 8th year of his reign, when he was still young, Josiah began to seek the God of his ancestor David. Then in the 12th year, he began to purify Judah and Jerusalem, destroying all the pagan shrines, the Asherah poles, and the carved idols and cast images. He ordered that the altars of Baal be destroyed and demolished, and that the incense altars which stood above them be broken down. He also made sure the Assyrian poles, the carved idols, and the cast images were smashed and scattered over the graves of those who had sacrificed to them. He burned the bones of the pagan priests on their altars, and so he purified Judah and Jerusalem. He did the same thing in the towns of Manasseh, Ephraim, and Simeon, even as far as the Naphtali, and in the regions all around them. He destroyed the pagan altars and the Assyrian poles, and he crushed the idols into dust. He cut down all the incense altars throughout the land of Israel. Finally, he returned to Jerusalem. In the 18th year of the reign, after he had purified the land and the temple, Josiah appointed Shaphan, son of Ashiel, Messiah, the governor of Jerusalem, and Joah, the son of Joaz, the royal historian, to repair the temple of the Lord, his God. They gave Hilkiah, the high priest, the money they had been collecting by the Levites, that had been collected by the Levites, who served as gatekeepers at the temple of God. The gifts were brought by people from Manasseh, Ephraim, and from all the remnant of Israel, as well as all of Judah, Benjamin, and the people of Jerusalem. He entrusted the money to the men assigned to supervise the restoration of the Lord's temple. Then they paid the workers who did the repairs and the renovation of the temple. They hired carpenters and builders who purchased finished stone for the walls and timber for the rafters and beams. They restored what earlier kings of Judah had allowed to fall into ruin. Wow. So what can we learn from today's passage? Well, in verses 1 and 2, we read that Josiah was 8 when he became king, super young, but yet he had the courage to do what was right in the eyes of the Lord. Courage to do what was right. In verses 3 to 7, we read all about rebuilding. For those of you who remember in my last thought of the day, I mentioned the theme of returning to God post-pandemic. And here we have this great theme of rebuilding the land of his ancestor David, and scorching and taking out what was wrong and rebuilding to God's pleasure. Josiah, even at this young age, had the courage to remove what was getting in the way and making right the land of God, the land that God had given to his ancestor King David. And in fact, in verse 11 we read, they restored what earlier kings of Judah had allowed to fall into ruin. So he wasn't just restoring it, he was making it better. He was making it better to honour God, the God who honoured him. Went beyond what had been done previously. And from the passage we also learn that they collected money for the rebuilding, sharing this money out, hiring the right people to do the jobs with the right skill sets, and as a mark of respect for their skill sets, paying them. How important is that? Now personally, and as a family, we've been struggling to understand what church now looks like for us, post-pandemic. But here we read of Josiah having the courage to rebuild. And today in BenBinFro, rebuild we must. So whether you're a gatekeeper, a priest, a carpenter, a builder, a humble water carrier, know that God has a place for you in this rebuilding. Simply turn to him in prayer and find out where you fit in. Amen.